Good evening. Thanks for joining us on India Business Hour. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines we're tracking for you tonight. G20 leaders deplore the war in Ukraine, and the joint statement echoes Prime Minister Modi's words that this is not the era for war. Also says the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons is inadmissible. India takes over the G20 presidency from Indonesia and will host the high-profile gathering next year. Poland says the missile strike that killed 2 of its citizens was due to an accident by Ukraine's air defense. Poland's president terms the incident unfortunate, adds there are no grounds to believe that the attack was intentional. Former U.S. President Donald Trump announces his 2024 presidential run. This comes days after the Republican Party sees less than impressive midterm election performance, with several candidates endorsed by Trump losing in the polls. The CEO of Jaguar Land Rover, Thierry Bolloré, resigned, citing personal reasons. Adrian Mardell, who's been with JLR for 30 years, has taken over as the interim CEO from today. The revival of Jet Airways flies into turbulence. Sources say lenders are likely to take a stand against the Jalan Kalrock consortium in court, saying the conditions for the takeover have not been met. CNBC-TV18 reported last week that the consortium is yet to make any payments to the lenders to assume control of the airline. The Sensex and the Nifty end at record closing highs, even as a volatile session ends with marginal gains. The Nifty Bank also hits a record high, but metal stocks are under pressure. A day after the lock-in period for pre-IPO investors expired, SoftBank decides to sell more stake in Paytm. Sources say shares worth $215 million will be sold through a block deal tomorrow at a 7% discount to the current market price. Global Health, the holding company of Medanta, makes a stellar debut on the Lal Street as shares rise 23%. Shares of snacks maker Bikaji up 6% on debut. The International Civil Aviation Organization says India's performance in the audit has been the best to date, says aviation regulator DGCA. Government also says face masks are no longer mandatory on flights, but it's advisable to wear them. Confidence is shaken, but we will move forward, says the CEO of Binance. Days after the collapse of rival exchange FTX, also adds that regulators are going to scrutinize this industry a lot more. Elon Musk issues an ultimatum to Twitter staff, gives them time until Thursday to decide if they want to work longer hours at higher intensity or quit the company with a severance package. Musk also announces that Twitter paid verification services will be relaunched on the 29th of November after a botched first attempt. And it's third time lucky for NASA's Artemis moon mission. The crewless capsule will make a 3-week voyage around the moon and return to Earth. Well, a packed show lined up for you. The top story tonight: leaders of the G20 nations wrapped up their summit in Bali with a joint declaration condemning the war in Ukraine. In a strong statement, the joint communique said the G20 deplores Russia's aggression in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin did not attend the summit. Russia's foreign minister, who attended the event, was not present on the last day. Meanwhile, India has taken over the G20 presidency from Indonesia. Kiran Khatri wraps up what was an eventful summit and previews the high-profile gathering that will take place in India next year.
G20 leaders in Bali woke up to news of an explosion in Poland which killed at least 2 people near the Ukraine border. US President Joe Biden called for an emergency meeting of G7 and NATO leaders on the sidelines of the summit. After the meeting, Biden said it was unlikely that the missile was fired by Russia.
Contest that. I don't want to say that till we completely investigate, but it is. It's unlikely in the minds of the trajectory that it was fired from Russia, but we'll see.
The G20 joint declaration condemned the war in Ukraine in strong terms. The statement said it deplores in the strongest terms the aggression by the Russian Federation against Ukraine and demands its complete and unconditional withdrawal. The statement went on to say the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons is inadmissible. The peaceful resolution of conflicts, efforts to address crisis, as well as diplomacy and dialogue are vital. Today's era must not be of war. These words echoed what Prime Minister Modi said at the Shanghai Cooperation Summit in September.
Prime Minister's message that this is not the era of war and that the best way is to return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy to resolve the conflict resonated very deeply across all the delegations.
Post the final declaration, it was time for Indonesia to hand over the G20 presidency to India by passing the honorary gavel. India will hold a high-profile gathering next year. In the build-up, there will be 200 meetings across 32 different sectors, culminating in the summit on September 9th and 10th of 2023.
आज मैं ये आश्वासन देना चाहता हूं कि भारत की G20 अध्यक्षता इंक्लूसिव, एम्बिशियस, डिसिसिव और एक्शन ओरिएंटेड होगी.
From sessions on health and digital transformation to bilateral meetings with world leaders, PM Modi had a packed schedule in Bali. He held bilateral talks with leaders of Germany, Italy, France, and the UK. The new British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak approved 3,000 work visas for Indian professionals after meeting Prime Minister Modi. However, there was no bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and China's President Xi Jinping. Both leaders came face-to-face at a dinner and exchanged pleasantries, but they have not held any bilateral talks since the clash between Indian and Chinese soldiers in Galwan Valley in May 2020. One of the highlights of the summit was the meeting between President Xi and President Biden, where they reached common ground in warning Russia over the use of nuclear weapons and agreeing to restart climate talks to cut emissions. President Biden also said he does not believe there's any imminent attempt by China to invade Taiwan. One leader who skipped the G20 summit was Russia's President Vladimir Putin. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov did represent Russia in his place. However, he left the summit before the joint declaration condemning the Ukraine war was released. In Mumbai with Kiran Khatri, Arundhati Ramanan.
Well, India takes over the G20 presidency, and joining us now is Amitab Kant, India's G20 Sherpa. Mr. Kant, many thanks for joining us here. I know this is a very busy day for you, and you're currently traveling from one location to the other, so we appreciate your time. To start with, congratulations on the presidency, and we wish you luck as well. I want to get the backstory from you on what transpired, especially in the last 48 hours, to ensure that after a lot of back and forth on the text, on the wordings of the G20 communique, there was consensus on the final that went out.
So, Shireen, it was these were very complex and very tough negotiations because many countries were involved. There was total deadlock over the last 6 days. In the last 48 hours, India worked in partnership with all developing and emerging markets to ensure that we could build consensus around the para on geopolitics. The challenge of Russia-Ukraine war, breakdown of supply chains, many other issues were very, very complex and complicated. And the para which was originally being drafted was not a para, it was a very long statement, which was very one-sided. We felt, all of us felt that it should be instead of G20 getting into issues of security and war, etc., it's not essentially a forum for security. It's a forum for growth and progress, and therefore we should fall back on the UN resolution. So we had to work through 2 difficult nights to finally convince the G7 that we should go back to the UN resolution, pick up components of that, and really spell out the voting pattern as given in the UN resolution, and then conclude with what the Prime Minister Modi had said, that this is the age of diplomacy and dialogue, and this is not the era of war. Even this was objected to by some countries in our neighborhood, but we fought, and finally, I think all the emerging markets managed to stand together and convince all the G7 countries that G20 should stand united in this moment of crisis. And finally, everybody came together, and at the last minute,
well, it's interesting what you say, Mr. Kant, that over the last 48 hours, after a lot of back and forth led by India, you managed to convince the G7 to change the text that went out when it comes to Russia and Ukraine. And for the benefit of our viewers, I'm just reading out the final statement from the G20 communique. There were other views and different assessments of the situations and sanctions, recognizing that the G20 is not the forum to resolve security issues. We acknowledge that security issues can have significant consequences for the global economy. What's also interesting is the inclusion of what we heard from Prime Minister Modi in the statement saying today's era must not be of war. So, Mr. Kant, who supported India in the efforts to change the draft text to the final communique?
Yeah. So actually, India led the way, but I think a good thing was that Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, but even Turkey, all of them joined hands with us to say that we need an even balanced statement. It can't be condemnation all the way. There are various challenges. And we managed to convince G7 at the last minute that you can't have a statement which is totally political in nature. And therefore, our focus should be on growth. This is the moment when the world needs growth. This is the moment when the world needs progress on sustainable development goals.
Well, Mr. Kant, I know it's a busy day, so we'll get you back when you return to India, but appreciate you joining us today to just give us some color and the backstory on how the final G20 communique was arrived at. You can catch our special on the G20 Summit that's coming up for you tonight at 9:30 p.m. on the News Center. The other big story, 2 people killed after a missile hit a Polish village near the Ukrainian border. Now, the Polish President Duda says the missile strike was due to an accident by Ukraine's air defense, terming the incident unfortunate. Sanjay Suri joins us from London. Sanjay, the Polish president saying that it appears not to be an intentional attack, but an unfortunate accident, something that we seem to be hearing from the US as well.
The clarification from Polish President Duda that the missile attacks into Poland were an unfortunate accident and not an intended attack has diffused what was building up into quite an international crisis. Had it been the case that the Russians had launched that missile attack, it could have been a direct attack into a NATO member country, and that potentially could have invoked Article 5 of the NATO Convention, under which an attack on any one member is to be considered an attack on all members for NATO then to respond accordingly. This appears to have been an accidental fallout of the Ukrainian air defense in the face of that huge Russian missile attack on its territory at that time. By Ukrainian indications, about 90 missiles were launched by the Russians into Ukraine, of which Ukraine intercepted as many as 70. Through the course of that defense, one missile either malfunctioned or was diverted off its intended trajectory. Exactly what went wrong has not been specified yet, but the indications now have been confirmed, and these are indications that had emerged early, that it is a Ukrainian missile that had landed into Poland. It was described at the very start as a Russian-built missile, but of course Russian equipment is used by Ukraine. A lot of the S-300 anti-missile missile systems that Ukraine uses are Russian-built. So the fact that it was Russian-built did not mean anything definitive one way or the other. But this clarification now has eased tensions, and it has shown that in this instance, Russia was right.
Oh, absolutely. It certainly has calmed what could have been an international crisis, as Sanjay was pointing out. At this point in time, we've heard from the Polish president as well as from President Biden suggesting that they don't believe that there is conclusive evidence to prove that Russia was behind the missile attack. A volatile day has seen the Sensex and the Nifty ending flat with a slight positive bias. However, both these indices ended the day at record closing highs. Banks continue to outperform. The Bank Nifty posting another record close. Mid-caps, though, underperforming, and the benchmark ended over 0.5% in the red. Japanese investor SoftBank is looking to offload its stake in Indian fintech player Paytm. The company is likely to sell Paytm shares worth over $200 million as the lock-in period for pre-IPO investors ends. SoftBank is offering to sell 29 million Paytm shares at over 601 rupees per share, which is at a discount of more than 7% to its current market price. Jaguar Land Rover CEO Thierry Bolloré resigned from the top executive position today, citing personal reasons. According to a statement released by Tata Motors, Bolloré will be leaving the company by the 31st of December. Prior to JLR, Thierry was the CEO at Renault Group and handled senior positions at the global automotive supplier Faurecia. Meanwhile, Adrian Mardell, who's been associated with JLR for over 30 years, will be the interim CEO of the company starting the 16th of November. Onto a CNBC-TV18 exclusive, the revival of Jet Airways has hit turbulence. Sources say lenders are likely to take a stand against the Jalan Kalra consortium in court, saying that the conditions for the takeover have not been met. CNBC-TV18 reported last week that the consortium is yet to make payments to lenders to assume control of the airline. Ritu standing by with more details. Ritu.
Well, the impasse between the Jalan Kalra consortium and the lenders of Jet Airways is growing by the day. And in the latest development, we've been given to understand that the Jalan consortium recently moved the NCLT, seeking to take control of the airline, claiming that it has met all the conditions precedent required for the takeover. However, we've been given to understand from our banking sources that lenders will contest this claim in court, and they believe the conditions have not been met, which included securing slots, international traffic rights, which alone requires the consortium to have at least 20 aircrafts to be able to fly internationally, a condition that they have not yet met. The court has given the lenders time to file their reply, and the next hearing in the matter is the 29th of November, the date to watch out for. In other developments, the monetization plan for Jet Airways, which includes selling off about 11 of its owned aircrafts to raise some money, that has also been put on hold, given these differences that have now cropped up between the consortium and the lenders. Lenders are also wary of the ongoing investigation reports against Florian Frisch in Europe. However, we understand they've not officially sought a response from the consortium on the matter, but they do remain concerned about it. And lastly, on the matter of the PF and gratuity dues payment, which the NCLAT had directed the consortium to pay to employees about 250 odd crore rupees, that we understand the consortium has clearly told the lenders it will not pay any additional sum of money, and it has to come from whatever has already been allotted. And that is the response they gave to us in their reply to the CNBC-TV18 query, where they said they're ready to take over the company. They met all the conditions, already transferred 150 crores to the lenders, and there is no delay on their end. And as far as the PF gratuity due matter is concerned, they've already made it clear that no additional money will be given out.
Ritu, appreciate you joining us. And there's more news from the aviation sector. The Indian aviation sector scored well in a safety audit conducted by the United Nations body International Civil Aviation Organization. Danish is standing by to take us through the highlights of the audit. Danish.
Well, in a good news for the Indian aviation sector, all Indian airlines have performed really well in the recently conducted audit by the International Civil Aviation Organization. Well, as per sources, this is India's best performance till date, and the airlines were audited on various parameters like licensing, operations, airworthiness, legislation, organization, personnel and aerodromes. So after doing a thorough audit which began on 9th of November and it was concluded today, the sources have confirmed to CNBC-TV18 that this is India's best performance till date, and the sources further confirmed to us that the final report from ICAO is awaited, and once that report comes out, things will be more concrete for the entire aviation sector of the country. But all in all, if we see, this is a very positive news for the Indian aviation sector, and the Indian airlines have performed really well if we compare it from the previous few audits until now. This is the country's best performance ever.
And staying with aviation, the Aviation Ministry has revised its COVID safety protocols. Now, in-flight announcements will only advise passengers to wear a mask, but no penal action will be taken for not wearing one. Snacks maker BKG Foods has made a firm debut on the Dalal Street, listing at a premium of about 7%. Remember, the public issue of the company was subscribed over 26 times, led by qualified institutional buyers who subscribed over 80 times of their allotted share. Sticking to listings, Global Health, the operator of the Medanta chain of hospitals, makes a strong debut, listing at a premium of 20%. The IPO was subscribed nearly 10 times, with retail investors bidding for 88% of the allotted quota. Petitioners have withdrawn pleas challenging the constitutional validity of online gambling ban in Tamil Nadu. The state government has told the Madras High Court there would be no punitive action till the ordinance comes into effect. We will head into a break, but up next, confidence is shaken, but we will move forward, says the CEO of Binance after the collapse of rival exchange FTX. That and more when we return. The CEO of the world's largest cryptocurrency exchange, Binance, has broken his silence on the collapse of rival exchange FTX. Speaking at an event in Saudi Arabia, the Binance CEO, popularly known as CZ, said the industry's confidence is shaken, but we will move forward. He also added that the regulatory scrutiny will increase, but it can only reduce scams and not prevent them.
Level of integration is actually very, very good in the US, whereas in most other parts of the world, we're still trying to play catch up on that front. US is more limited in product offerings like futures, earned products, etc. But at the same time, if we look at US, one of the most well-regulated markets in the world, Madoff happened. Yeah. Madoff is 10 times bigger than FTX, right? So, so that shows like regulation doesn't prevent scammers or fraudsters. So it just reduces it. So we can borrow from it, but we can't just say, look, regulation is going to fix all of this. I think having a and then the industry players, we got to talk to 200 regulators all around the world. Having an association that establishes some best practices is actually helpful on both sides. So that's something else we're doing. This is something that we were planning even a few months back. But now, given what's happened, we want to accelerate this and sort of do this. So I think the industry got to come together, become tighter, and become better. So short term, there's a lot of pain. Long term, it's actually causing us to accelerate many of the efforts we're doing to make this industry healthier.
Well, short term, there is going to be a lot of pain on account of what we've seen happen with FTX. That's the Binance CEO. Time for news from the startup space. Shruti joins us now with a quick snapshot of the startup action tonight. Shruti.
Well, thank you for that. Here are the headlines from the startup world. KB Group, South Korea's largest financial services provider, partners with Elevate Venture Partners as an anchor investor and co-GP through its subsidiary KB Investment. KB has committed $100 million, including co-investments, to the total fund size. In more funding news, higher ed tech platform SimplyLearn raises $45 million in a new funding round led by GSV Ventures at an undisclosed valuation. CLAL Insurance and Disruptad also participated in the round. SimplyLearn said it would use the funds to boost its growth plans in India and international markets. Moving on, digital solutions for diabetic patient startup Beto backs $33 million in Series B funding led by Lightrock India with participation from Health Quad, Flipkart and existing investors. The fresh funds will be utilized to expand Beto's diabetes care programs pan-India. Ashwin Damera, the CEO of EdTech unicorn Eruditus, invests an undisclosed amount in digital sports platform Khelo More. The investment was made through his family office, Damera Ventures. Now founded by former international cricketer and CEO Jatin Paranjpe, Khelo More works as an aggregator of coaches and academies through Indian cities for sports. FHRAI writes to SEBI to stop OYO from launching its IPO in the wake of a penalty imposed by the CCI on the firm for unfair business practices, PTI reports. OYO, however, says FHRAI is misrepresenting the CCI order and the letter to SEBI is to distract attention from the executive committee meeting of FHRAI being held as null and void by the NCLT. With that, it's back to you.
Shruti, many thanks. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has announced his bid to reclaim the White House in 2024. The move comes after the Republican Party underperformed in the midterms, and many candidates endorsed by Trump lost the polls. Matthew Thomas reports on Trump's presidential bid and why it could herald yet another period of tumult within the Republican Party and American politics.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
After winning in 2016 and losing in 2020, former US President Donald Trump has launched his third bid for the White House.
We will make America glorious again. And we will make America great again. Thank you very much.
Trump is using the same Make America Great Again slogan he used in 2016 to woo the voters. But the political landscape in 2022 is much different. The Republicans underperformed in the midterm elections. Candidates endorsed by Trump like Doug Mastriano, Mehmet Oz, Tudor Dixon and many more lost their elections. Even right-leaning media outlets in the US are turning against Trump. An editorial on the Wall Street Journal called Trump the biggest loser of the midterms. Trump's favorite newspaper, the New York Post, ridiculed him by equating him to Humpty Dumpty, who had a great fall. Some anchors at Fox News who have been Trump loyalists so far are starting to turn on him as well.
Trump is dragging the Republican Party into the mud again. He thinks only he can win. He's conveniently ignoring his own record.
So going into 2024, the Republicans are going to be looking for candidates who are focused on winning. If the voters conclude that you're putting your own ego or your own grudges ahead of what's good for the country, they're going to look elsewhere, period.
Trump is likely to face stiff competition from within the Republican Party. His biggest rival is likely to be the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, who earned Republicans their biggest midterm victory by a 20-point margin. Trump has given DeSantis a new nickname, a clear sign that he sees him as a potential rival.
Trump at 71, Ron DeSanctimonious at 10%, Mike Pence at 7. Oh, Mike's doing better than I thought.
Donald Trump's daughter Ivanka Trump has issued a statement saying that she will no longer play a part in her father's latest attempt to win the White House. She said, and I quote, "I love my father very much. This time around I am choosing to prioritize my young children and the private life we are creating as a family. I do not plan to be involved in politics." End of quote. Trump is also the target of several legal proceedings, including one alleging that he incited a mob to storm the Capitol. Another alleges that he held confidential documents at his residence after losing the 2020 elections. Experts say that he could be launching a presidential bid to avoid prosecution in these cases. Despite all of this, Trump remains popular. He currently leads early polling of the Republican primary by a substantial margin in most national surveys. In Mumbai, Matthew Thomas.
And before we wrap, third time lucky for NASA. Its moon mission is lifted off after 2 postponements. You're looking at the first images sent by the unmanned capsule, which is on a 25-day journey to the moon and back, even though no astronauts are on board. The success of the mission is important because the next couple of missions are intended to ferry humans to the moon. And thanks very much for watching India Business Hour.